Welcome to Draft Sickos on the No Ceilings NBA podcast feed and YouTube channel. I am your host, Maxwell Baumbach, and this is the show where we cover everybody from the biggest names to the deepest of sleepers. And today I am joined by Keenan Womack from SI as well as Draft Punk, a great Substack. He has been putting out work like a maniac lately. Every day I'm getting stuff in my inbox from this guy. It's great, it's thorough, and it's constant. So I'm a big fan of the work he does. Keenan, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm great. I'm really grateful to be on, man. I'm a big fan of y'all forever. So I've done a show with Steven before, so with setting the pace. So it was a lot of fun with him. So I've since I met him, I've been following you guys, been a big fan. So really excited to be on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so you've been obviously doing stuff in the basketball media for a little bit here. Could you give people just a little bit on your background? Because I know you're pretty embedded in a lot of things in the Texas scene and things
Yeah.
like that. So if you just kind of walk people through that real quick.
Yeah, for sure, man. So I'm Keenan Womack. I graduated from the University of Texas in 2019, and then I started working for Rivals University of Texas affiliate called Orange Bloods. It's been around for like 20 years. So I wrote for them for 2.5 years, and then moved on, and now I'm writing for SI, and I love it over there. And then I have my own Substack called Draft Punk Official, and I talk about all kinds of stuff over there. I do big boards. I write about UT basketball. I write about the Mavericks. I write about the NBA in general. So I love writing, man. I love writing. It's my passion. I love doing it, whether it's about basketball or whatever, but I love writing, man. I love the process and all that.
For sure. Well, yeah, it's what stood out to me. It's what got me onto you is obviously, SI and Draft Digest, all that stuff came across my radar a while back. But then, yeah, to subscribe to your individual Substack, it's great stuff. Would encourage everybody to go do that. But let's get into the draft talk this week. So instead of covering guys that had big weeks, and these guys did to an extent, I wanted to focus just on some recent risers. Two guys that I think are just sort of interesting off the top of the show. The first guy we're going to cover here is Hunter Sallis at Wake Forest. So Sallis is a guy who had a good amount of buzz coming out of high school, 15th via RSCI in the 2021 high school class, goes to Gonzaga, has an okay freshman season, is sort of like a spark plug energy bench defender, but like not a guy that has significant draft traction. There's some hope, hey, maybe year two, the offense gets going a little bit. Maybe he can start to shoot more. That doesn't really materialize. He is just kind of the same guy he was that first year. Transfers to Wake Forest. My expectations, just to be completely honest, were low. I was just kind of like, maybe this will work out. I kind of actually anticipated him to play a similar role next to Cam Hildreth, around Andrew Carr, like some of those guys, and Damari Santo, Monsanto. I thought it was going to be more of the same. That is not the case. He is lighting the world on fire. He is averaging 18.1 points per game on 50, 42, 79 splits. He is just an excellent scorer, and he was a guy that, I don't know, like, maybe I'm interested to get your approach on this. Like, when guys come out of nowhere or start really hot, I'm always a little slower to move them up, especially when they're older prospects, just because I'm like, maybe the shot's just falling at a really high clip. Like, we see it every year. There are guys that have this really hot shooting start, then they sort of tail off. Like, different type of player, but a guy like Jackson Robinson this year had this crazy 3-point percentage on super high volume. And then you look at the numbers, they're mostly spot ups, and then things kind of dwindle down. With Sallis, he's like gotten better. His ACC play has progressed. That 40% beyond the arc, but he's also like 53.5% on pull-up twos. Like, he is just a complete well-rounded scorer now. What's sort of been your prospect journey with Sallis? And were you quicker to buy in, or were you kind of like me where it's like, well, let's just kind of see where this goes?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because his freshman year was my first year at Rivals. So I was sort of getting in, or I guess he was the year before, but like I was getting into rankings and stuff like that right as he was coming up, right? So again, I kind of agreed with you. I thought he was going to be kind of well, actually, I guess I disagree with you a little bit. I thought he was going to be more of a scorer at Gonzaga, and like you said, he ended up kind of being a defensive player. But I mean, at Wake Forest, his true shooting percentage is over 60%, and he's with volume, like you said. He has limitless range, man. He can just pull up from wherever. He can do it off the dribble. He can do it off the catch. I mean, he's typically doing it off the dribble, as you know. He has the ball in his hands a lot. He's a high usage percentage. What I like about him too is, like you said, he's gotten better as conference play has gone on, right? So a lot of these guys, they play kind of a weaker non-conference schedule. They pad their numbers, their stats look great, and then they get into conference play. It happens, especially in the Big 12, for example. That's what I'm most
Yeah.
familiar with. Happens every year. You have a dude who's just amazing. He's shooting 52% on 7 attempts a game from three. He gets to the Big 12 and he's shooting 29% on 6 attempts. It just happens. And Sallis the thing with Sallis too is he plays up. Like when they played Duke, that was the best game he's played maybe as a college player, and did it on the biggest stage in the biggest situation possible. And that means something to me as I'm not a scout, but you know what I mean, as an analyst. It's like seeing a guy who steps up to the challenge. I mean, that's a guy that's going to go hard in the tournament, a guy that's going to go hard in the playoffs, a guy that's going to, rivalry games in the NBA, wherever he ends up. I have him towards around the 25 to 30 range at the moment, because he's a little bit older. And like you said, it was sort of a surprising change of role for him over time. So I love watching him play, though, man. He's so electric. He's one of the most electric players in college basketball, regardless of conference this year. I think, and it's he definitely came back down to earth against Notre Dame, right? Like,
Yeah.
he had a rough game against Notre Dame, and they lost that game, and they really, really needed to win that game. They're on the bubble.
And then he had the down one against Virginia Tech too yesterday.
So it's been like he hit this peak and then he kind of fell. I mean, that's expected for anybody, but what I like is the range. I think that's what translates the most, is the ability to shoot off the bounce too. I mean, he's just going to have to be able to do that at the next level, and he's gotten so good at it this year. I mean, 18 a game is crazy.
Yeah. That efficient of an 18 a game in the ACC is nuts. So I think there's a really good scoring profile for him at this point, where he has, like you mentioned, that just NBA range. I'm with you on the confidence. Like, I think that's huge. I think one thing that where it really stands out with rookies in particular is free throw percentage. Like, so many rookies in the NBA just shoot a poor free throw percentage, and I think it's just those nerves. Like, to me, just having a guy that I know is going to go in there and kind of embrace the moment and not really be afraid of it matters. I know some people think that kind of stuff is hokey. I don't. I buy that. I think it's really important. But with Sallis, he has that unlimited range off the catch. The fact that there's a pull-up game there, like, even if I don't know, sometimes that can get hand waved because people will be like, well, that's not really going to be his role at the next level. And it's not, but it's also good to have. Like, if a team chases him off the line and he sees the rim protector, the fact that he's a very good pull-up shooter from 15, 18 feet is going to come in handy at points. He's always been good at the rim. Really, really gets up off of 1 foot, can finish above the rim. Good, reliable interior finisher. So he has this sort of 3-level scoring game now. The defense, I think, has been it's okay. Like, I don't think it's been spectacular this year. Part of that could be role. I think how he measures is going to matter a lot. I think if he comes in and he's like 6'3" with a 6'6" wingspan, then it gets a little bit dicey, because I think the playmaking on offense is sort of my biggest hang up, as well as like how many positions is he going to be able to guard, because he is on the skinnier side. So if we're in a situation where he is, like, let's say he's 6'3" barefoot, 6'5", 6'6" wingspan, then it's like, okay, well, he's sort of point guard size, but he doesn't really have point guard ball skills. And then, like, the number of guys that fill that role is pretty narrow, and like it can go downhill really quickly. Whereas even like a guy like Grayson Allen, just like as an example, came in like pretty polished on the guard skills front, who's like a similar guy, like similar height, really athletic, but bulkier. I think the measurements are going to be really important for him. Do you agree? And then sort of how do you feel about his playmaking? Because it's another thing where it's gotten better as the year has gone on. Or do you think maybe it's something that comes along in time, because this is like his first year being this type of scorer, that like he hasn't had to make these reads? So maybe we give him a little bit more leeway and patience to work that sort of thing out.
Yeah. Well, I want to touch on the defense for just a
go
quick
for
second.
it.
I think what you said is correct. I think I mean, he's just so responsible for so much on the offensive end now. And you see it in like the NBA, guys who are amazing offensive players, unless they're bigs, typically aren't elite defenders. Obviously, there's exceptions, of course. There's Kawhis and stuff like that. But, I think it's one of those things where the offense is so good that, whether he's not a terrible defender. The fact that he's an okay defender, I think makes it worth it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it makes him a pro prospect because, like, if we're being real, the NBA is all the rules point to the offense. All of the way that the game is played is all about scoring points versus being more defensive. So I think Hunter Sallis definitely is entering the NBA in the right era for his skill set. I do agree with the measurements, though, man. If he's 6'3", I mean, we saw yesterday as a football guy too. I watched the combine yesterday, for example.
Yep.
Xavier Worthy from Texas ran a 4.2 140. He was a projected early second round pick. Now he's gonna be first round pick. So these measurements matter.
Yeah,
These combine measurements are important. And even when people kind of scoff at them and laugh and go, oh, whatever, oh, his hands aren't big enough. That's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about the size of a guy who could possibly play a little bit of off guard. If he's 6'3", he's kind of the NBA Marcus Carr. If he's
yeah.
right, he's like a guy that has shooting guard skills, off guard skills, I guess I should say. But he's point guard size, you know. So he's sort of and that's sort of the role that Carr even had at Texas too. So not to just bring it back to UT again.
Yeah.
But that's my point of reference for a lot of this stuff.
For sure. Well, like a guy like Keon Ellis was like a similar case, right? Where like he was a guy who had this really nice kind of two guard skill set, skinnier side. I think Sallis is better put together than Keon, but both came in as upperclassmen. Keon measures short at the combine and he goes like in the 40s, and he's managed to like carve out an NBA role for himself.
Sure.
And he was probably more potent defensively than Sallis, but he got to play a more, reserved off ball role, whatever. I think the bottom line is like, depending on how he measures, the fact that he's like not quite like 6'6", 6'7", makes the skill set a little bit more challenging because those guard skills aren't all the way there at this point. But I do think at the end of the day, like I say this a lot with this class, like you've got to rank who's there. And the fact that there's just a guy who is this athletic, that's on this upward trajectory, that is scoring the ball like this, it's hard to imagine that if he goes in, he's not getting drafted like top 45.
Oh, sure.
Point,
yeah.
Right. Like,
yeah.
So that's where I'm at with him. If we do see like improved guard skill in conference play, like what do you think is the highest that Hunter Sallis can go? Like, do you think there's a way he could crack like top 20? If someone's like maybe talks himself into like there's some Christian Brown here or like that sort of a thing, or like he has a big tourney run where they're like there's just an athleticism and baseline competence and a scoring profile. Like, is that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I think it's like, almost any player is a tournament run away from a first round pick, and a guy that's been you know what I mean? Like a guy that's in contention already for being selected. I think he is absolutely a guy that can really improve his stock. I think he's a guy that could probably I think the highest he would be taken is probably like 25. That's about where I have him. I have him 28 right now or 29, something like that. I just finished my big board today, so
yeah, I've got to finish mine after
this. I'm gonna drop it tomorrow. I'm really excited about it. But I have him around there, around the 25 to 35 range, roughly.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably fair for him, but I think he could totally be a guy that outplays his selection. I think he could be a guy that contributes early. Again, he's the type of guy, he's got a mature offensive game, right? So he's not a project on offense. Like he knows what he's doing. You can throw him in an NBA lineup and he can score. Whether he's going to be able to defend at a high level is obviously up for debate. But, it might be a thing where he's exerting so much on the offensive end that he doesn't have enough to play defense. And so I'm thinking maybe in the NBA, he might be a better defender because he's going to have less of an offensive role.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think.
Possible. No, I agree. I think that's I think that's completely on the table. And that's like why I brought up a guy like Grayson Allen too, is I think like ideally the playmaking comes along and then that's sort of what the role looks like, where it's like maybe you're more point guard size, but you can play the off ball role just by virtue of like toughness and defense. And, and I think Sallis like has the tools to do that if his frame fills out. And then like on offense, it's like you shoot, you run a little bit of offense, but you're mostly there to complement, attack the rim when you have the lane and shoot. Let's move on to Justin Edwards. This is kind of a completely different discussion. This is a guy.
It really is completely the opposite.
So this is a guy who came in with sky high expectations. He was a guy that I think was probably like second or third on my preseason board. 6'7", 6'8", somewhere in that range. Super long. Like if you physically create an NBA wing in a lab, like he looks like Justin Edwards. He moves like Justin Edwards. offensively, just really rough start to the year. Really frustrating tendencies, a lot of like catch the ball on the 3-point line, stall for a second, pump fake, and then like dribble into a contested 2 type of behavior. A
That sounds
lot
like
of
my
that.
game, man.
Yeah. My game now is just like being horrified to take a jump shot. Like I've just
I'm
reached that
corner
stage.
threes all day, baby.
Shots gone for me. I'm entirely an interior player at this stage. So yeah, Edwards is he sort of struggles out of the gate. I think there's still field questions. I think the defense has been okay, but given the fact that he's not in a huge offensive role, you would have hoped for more on the defensive end. But he's still a guy with a high recruiting pedigree, and teams take those guys really seriously and tend to give him more the benefit of the doubt. He has this 28-point explosion against Alabama. And in that game, when he is a guy who just like takes the 3 when it's there, he looks awesome. In conference play, the volume's low. He's only taken 2 threes per game, but he's up to 48% during that stretch. It's an interesting predicament because on this Kentucky team, I think at this stage in the season, it's unreasonable and almost would be irresponsible to give him a bigger offensive role, just like given the amount of options that they have. But if he just like does well in this role, it's easy to see a team maybe talking themselves into Edwards anyway on draft night. How have you been feeling about Justin Edwards' game, and like where do you sort of have him in that big board? Because he's a guy that I don't know what to do with, because I could see a team talking themselves into him really high. I'm just not sure like how I feel about the gamble really at this point.
Yeah, kind of what you said. It's like he's on a team too where there's so many guys that are hunting their shots, right? He's on a team with Rob Dillingham, who like I love Dillingham. I have him top 5. That's how good I
Okay,
think
yeah.
Dillingham is.
Mm-hmm.
And I have Shepard top 8. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
Shepard's great too.
Shepard's
But
awesome.
there's just so many mouths to feed on that team. There are so many guys who can score. And whether it's a great team is still kind of up for debate. But individually, they have a bunch of great scorers. So I kind of understand why maybe he got off to a rougher start, because he's not the guy. I agree with what you said too. Like I think it's too late for him to really show out, because they can't expect him to take the mantle as the tournament starts. That is not how things work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's just one of those things where it's a little too late, I think, for him to really fly up draft boards unless he has a crazy combine. Again, combine matters, but
it does, yeah.
I don't know. I have him about, let me check really quick. I just put this together, so it should be good. I have him in like the 40s. So he definitely moved up after the Alabama game, because I was like confused on whether he should even go pro at that point. I was like, he should maybe stay another year. I don't know. Obviously get the bag if you can, but I don't know, man. He's the type of guy it's a very good athlete. He's got great size and stuff too, but we haven't seen enough to like really know what he's capable of, because of how many guys on that team have the ball in their hands.
Yeah, and I think that like is a differentiating factor even between him and guys like Julian Phillips or Jordan Walsh last year, where we at least got them to we at least got to see a level of like, oh, what's going on out there. Like you are making good decisions with the ball. Like we get to see you dribble. We get to see you pass. We get to see you kind of play within the flow of an offense. Right? With Edwards, that's not really a strength of his, and he hasn't gotten to show a lot of that off. So like, it just feels like you're betting on a lot of hypotheticals with him. Where at least with those two, it's like there is in Phillips' case, like explosive athleticism and vertical pop and speed. And with Walsh, it was like high level defense, good feel, great frame. Where with Edwards, it's like good athlete. I can probably kind of shoot a little bit.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah, it's a scary bet. It's a scary bet. So yeah, I'm kind of in a similar place, I think, where it's like I feel better about him in the second, whether that's on like I'd probably give him one of those like 4-year like
why not
deals. Like it's worth a shot, like because if he does develop and this stuff does come around, it's fine. I don't think he's so behind in any respect that like the G League would kill him. Like I think there are some guys that like they would get just manhandled in the G League, and like for that reason they probably shouldn't even go pro. I don't think he's that. But yeah, I think he's a real project, and I just don't see the path for him to like super climb during the college season. It would have to be combine.
Yeah, totally agree. I just think it's a little too late for him to really fly up boards unless he averages 25 points a game for the rest of the season. I don't see happening.
I think we're on the same page there. So we're gonna take a quick break. On the other end, we're gonna talk about Coleman Hawkins and Collin Murray-Boyles, two kind of interesting high skill names. So we will be right back. Stick with us. All right. So I've got a piece coming out this week about Coleman Hawkins. Hawkins is a really interesting player. He is 6'10". He tested the draft waters last year. Had an interesting combine. It wasn't a stellar combine, but I thought that he showed he could play well within the flow of an offense in a reduced role, and I thought his defense looked great on the spacing of an NBA court in the combine. Goes back, limps out of the gate, just horrible start to the season. But he's dealing with some knee tendonitis, gets over that, and from like December 9th onward, he's been stellar. He's been shooting like 40% from three during that stretch. His assist to turnover ratio is the best it's ever been during the course of his college career. He's been great. And the defense looks good. I think the big hang up for him is I think he's not a guy who's going to be able to play small ball five despite being 6'10", just because the strength isn't there. And he's just not a great shot blocker. Like his best shot blocking skills are rotating over from somewhere else on the court or go like playing cat and mouse with a guard and forcing them to take a mid-range shot and blocking that. I don't think he's a guy who can anchor a defense, but I think he's a good defender. I do think the strength just holds him back. The weird thing with Hawkins this year is his interior scoring has dipped off. I do think that when he attacks, he's a little upright. He's not the strongest, like doesn't have the best touch against contact at the rim. That's something I'd like to see turn around. I do think the fact that he has been such an up and down, such an inconsistent player for 3 years is going to hurt him. Even like this stretch, it's like, all right, you're selling me on consistency based on like 20 games. Like it's not the greatest sample to be like, all right, well, he's been really consistent except for his horrible start to this season. Like that's still a tough sell. But I do see a guy who is 6'10" that can guard multiple positions. I think the shot is there. He takes a ton of them from NBA range. Good passer, good defender. Lacks the rebounding, lacks the strength. So just kind of a quirky player. And when you get to the second round, like at a certain point, you've just got to start taking a stab at different things. And I think like 6'10", a high skill guy who can defend, to me is a guy that I would like to swing on. I've got him around like the 40-ish mark. I think huge close to the season, dominant combine. He can get himself into that first round mix. But I think that he's been better than his general draft stock has maybe led people to believe. How do you feel about Coleman Hawkins?
Yeah, I think Hawkins is one of those guys that, like you said, he's a 4. He's not a 5. He's a guy that, like you said, also inconsistent. But Coleman Hawkins is an important piece of a pretty good team. He's a guy that does, it sounds cliche, but it really is true about him. He does a lot of stuff that like he dives for loose ball, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He does a lot of that kind of stuff. He competes. Yeah. And he's a good, I think he's an underrated, like connective passer. I don't think he's bad at doing that either. And like you said, the defense is impressive. I don't know that he's going to be in the top 40 picks though. I think for me at least, because like you said, the inconsistency is really concerning for a guy who isn't a superstar. He's never been a superstar. He doesn't project to be a superstar. He projects to be a high, at best, a high floor role player. And I think there is room for him to do that, but I think he should probably spend some time in the G League. And I think he probably will. I think he probably will. He'll probably spend like a full season in the G League, something like that. And I think it'll help him. Whether he ever becomes a guy that is a rotation NBA player, I don't know about that. I'm a little more, I'm a little more skeptical, I think, maybe than you are from what you said, in that he's just a guy that isn't elite at any one thing. And being 6'10" is great, especially for a power forward, but like there's a lot of dudes that are bigger than him. And there's dudes that are stronger than him, and there's dudes that are more athletic than him that have similar frames. So I think it's just going to be one of those things, man, where his combine's going to be important. I think we're going to see how big he is, the wingspan, that kind of stuff is going to play into it for sure. I would say he's probably picked around 45.
Yeah, yeah.
On the higher side, even. He could be a UDFA.
It wouldn't shock me. Yeah, it would not shock me at all if he doesn't get drafted.
I have him right around 55.
Yeah, I think that's probably where most teams would have him, I would guess. Yeah, because to like the rotation player thing is, I think, where I get more skeptical of him and where I'm like, maybe like around 40 is too high. Is that if you were going to be a rotation player, I think consistency is just so important. Like, even on a bad team, like coaches just like to know what they're going to get. And like I wrote about it in the article, which it's going to be up Monday morning. So by the time you're listening to this, the article probably is up. But just like the start to this season, he had some like weird up and down games, or it was last year. So last year he had one game against Penn State. Penn State was great last year. 15 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. And then against Monmouth, he was 1 for 5 shooting with 5 turnovers. Like, it's not even like, oh, he's good against the bad teams and bad teams. It's like, you just don't know. Like, some games he just shows up and he is laying like the loudest egg you've ever seen. Like, it's not even a case of when it's bad, you forget that he's on the court. Like, Cody Williams is a guy where, like, I would say my big gripe with Cody Williams is there's games where I'm just like, man, I wish Cody Williams was being more assertive out there.
He disappears.
Hawkins, when it's bad, it is so noticeably bad. Throwing the ball into the third row. He's taking 35-foot jumpers that are it's bad. It's really bad. And like Wendell Moore was the guy who was like in a similar vein, like completely different position. But like when Wendell Moore had like screw ups, like they were just the most frustrating screw ups. But when he was good, it was like, oh man, like I see the vision. He's like 6'6" and can put the ball on the deck and like solid shooter and good athlete. Like with Hawkins, it's that same kind of thing where like it's when it's bad, it's really bad. I think that is the tricky part of like if I'm the team drafting him, like, am I just likely to see value from that? And like you mentioned, he's probably a guy that between like just skill set and like strength and other things probably needs a year in the G. And then after that, like, am I just going to continue to invest in him if what I see in the G League is up and down play? Like it's tricky. And that to me is where like I think there's value in the size and the skill set. But if I felt better about the consistency of it, I'd be a lot more likely to be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll take him in the first. And I'm not there at this point.
Yeah, I think the question is whether he's going to go out there and get you 6 points and 4 rebounds, or whether he's going to be a minus 15 in 3 minutes. Like, it's like, which one are you going to get? It's like Jekyll and Hyde. Like, I don't know. Like you said, you don't know which one you're going to get. And probably the most important thing for a role player in the NBA is like, just don't be a minus 15 over 2.5. You know, not that I'm not saying he would be that either. I'm just saying, you know, he's had stretches like that in college. So I can't think of, there was one game I was watching a few weeks ago where he had I don't remember who it was against. I think it was a conference game where he wasn't great. He wasn't, I guess, as noticeably bad as he can be, but you know, he didn't blow me away. But then there's games I watch, he had a triple double.
Yeah.
You know, he had 10 assists in a game. So again, like I said, I like the connective passing a lot. He's not obviously going to be your primary guy that you run an offense or ever, but he's a guy that can make plays, maybe in the post, out of the post, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the ideal usage is like, orchestrating some handoff stuff, maybe some stuff around the elbow and the nail, and like that's about it. But yeah, I don't think he's going to be a hub. Just like he hasn't been one in college. Like you just don't see.
He hasn't been one since high school.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think he's very interesting, but not a guy I'm going to die in the hill on. So let's get to Collin Murray-Boyles. So he's been a guy that I've talked about a lot lately, and I'm still just like baffled by him. I put him 31st on the board that I'm doing currently, because I'm intrigued. I think there's some really cool stuff there. I think if it works, it's awesome. I'm not sure what the NBA role is if the shot doesn't come along. And for that reason, I'm just like not. And to be honest, I didn't pay a ton of attention to him early on in the season. Like I'm behind on him film wise relative to other players. So I'm just like not super confident in making that gamble at this stage, even with the production being what it is. What made him a guy that you wanted to talk about today, and sort of where are you at with him as a player?
Yeah. So first of all, I like that he's a freshman. That's just
Yep.
always a good start.
Mhm.
And the fact that he has a very mature game for a freshman, right? He's a very good perimeter defender. He's very strong. He's great in the paint. I watched the
Mhm.
LSU game and they lost. I think they lost on the road at LSU. But in his
Yep.
first 20 minutes, he had 8 points, 4 boards, and was just a menace on defense. Man, just really quick. He's big too. I think he's 6'8", something like that.
Mhm.
So he's like, that's the problem, is it's like he's like kind of a tweener, right? He's
Yeah.
kind of a, is he a 4? Is he a 3? What's his role? And like you said, if the shooting doesn't come along, then it's really a question of what he can do. The thing that I like about him though is that he competes, man. The defense is for real. He locked some dudes up, and like LSU doesn't necessarily have a bunch of great scoring options on that team, but the
Mhm.
guys they did have, I forget who he was up against, but like in general, South Carolina is like a decent defensive team. They struggle on offense sometimes, but they have like BJ Mack and Michi and Tellon Cooper and stuff. So, they have other defenders, but I mean, watching that game, I went into it with the idea to watch Collin Murray-Boyles, and then like I always kind of start watching other guys
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
But I was just locked in, man. It was so interesting to watch him play. He's just such an athlete, man,
Yeah.
and I just love the just the versatility to be able to switch defensively, right?
Mhm.
He can guard smaller guys who are quicker. He's got good lateral quickness, at least from what I've seen.
I agree. Yeah.
He just seems like a guy with a high degree of defensive ability, a guy that can really lock up a lot of positions, maybe 1 through 4 even.
Yeah. I think the combination of just like power and agility is pretty rare with
The
him. Like,
athleticism is like functional athleticism is for
yeah,
real.
it's very yeah, it's at like a really high level, and like he's one of those guys that like doesn't look like he would have bounce, and then he has bounce.
Mhm.
Those kind of guys are always like kind of scary to me because it's just like yeah, I don't know how easy it's going to be able to create a mismatch against him. I think like the one place where it might be tricky is at the 5 spot, just because like that's another like we keep saying it, but like measurables are going to be big for him because like if he comes in, he's one of these guys with like a J-Dub like +9 wingspan. All of a sudden it's going to be like never mind, I'm
All right,
fine
he's a
with it.
first
Like
rounder.
yeah, he cannot shoot and we'll live. Like if that's the case, like then yeah, like he might just be fine and you can maybe play him at the 5.
Yeah.
I don't know that he has like the chops to be a primary rim protector yet, and if he's not, then you probably need something more from him offensively because like there are 4s that still don't shoot in the NBA, but
Not a lot
they
of
generally need like a really particular fit. And it can be tough to develop a guy like that from scratch. Like I'm trying to think of like who are the guys that play that role that like got development sort of like laid out for them, and it seems
yeah.
generally like more like you just have to like scratch and claw and like slowly figure something out.
Yeah.
Um, I know that people are like, "Oh, well, he shot before." The free throw percentage going way up is encouraging. Like, I will 100% admit that. The fact that he was like a 50 something percent free throw shooter a while ago, and now he's almost up to 70 is great. Like, that's awesome. I struggle with people being, I don't know, like, maybe I'm just not super confident in myself as an evaluator when it comes to being like, this guy can't shoot, this guy won't shoot, whatever. The returns on guys who shoot this few threes and then become adequate 3-point shooters is really small. It's a really, really small number of guys. So then I sort of have to bank on him being a below average shooter. And if he is that, then like, are we just getting really excited about like bigger Jayshawn Tate? And you could argue like bigger Jayshawn Tate is awesome. Like
Yeah.
sign me right up for bigger Jayshawn Tate, especially in a class like this.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I still just really struggle with what the role looks like if he doesn't shoot, and then like how long does that take to materialize? Like how long does it take him to figure out how to play if that's what his game looks like? Am I getting value as a team drafting him if that's the case? And then also, the other thing I worry about with him is, oh gosh, I just lost it. Yeah, am I getting the value if he doesn't shoot? And yeah, I lost it. But yeah,
No,
so
it's
I
cool.
guess I'll just throw that one back to you. Like,
Yeah.
if the shot is like way below average or it just doesn't come along, what do you like? Do you think that's salvageable? Do you think he's a Xavier Tillman type of player where like he can still give you quality minutes in the right setting? Like how do you feel about that?
So what I do like about his offensive game that I neglected to mention earlier is his
Mhm.
footwork is great inside, man.
Yep.
Like
Mhm.
his against LSU, man, he had a couple of really tight spins that really fooled opponent. Like I mean, like dream shake type stuff. Like
Mhm.
that's what he was doing. Not quite that, but like spinning, faking dudes out for real, getting dudes up in the air, drawing fouls, that kind of thing. And like you said, free throw shooting isn't great, but the fact that he's up like 11% or something from like high school is a big deal to me.
Mhm.
It shows that he at least is taking initiative to fix a shot. And that's a thing that a lot of guys, there are guys in this class that have great measurables and even good stats that I hear intel about. And I'm just like, he doesn't have motor, he doesn't have drive.
Mhm.
And this guy does. And you can tell from the just like small improvements like that mean a lot. It means a lot to coaches, means a lot to a front office.
Mhm.
And I just think, say the shot doesn't come along, I still think there's a role for him because he can score inside, even though he's a little bit undersized. He's really strong. He's got hops. He's not going to be able to score against, I don't know, let's say Donovan Clingan when he's in the
Yeah,
NBA.
like you're not gonna like one-on-one like ISO to
Sure.
get him a post up against the paint, for
Obviously,
example. Yeah,
right. You wouldn't do
yeah. Mhm.
that. But he's going to be able to split defenders in the paint. He's going to be able to do some
Yeah.
things on the offensive end that don't require a deep shot. He needs to develop some kind of deep shot just so he can step
Mhm.
out and spread the floor a little bit. But I like him a lot. I have him right about where you have him.
Yeah.
I think I'm 33 right now. I don't remember
Mhm.
exactly, but right around there. So yeah, I agree with you on the placement. I think in this class full of a lot of question marks, man, I think he's got some answers that other players maybe don't have.
Yeah, and I think like, the splitting defenders point that you mentioned is like huge because I feel like so many times there'll be like a big guy that has like passing skill that isn't. I don't want to say it's not useful, but like how often is an NBA team gonna like post up a guy and then let him like spray it out from the post? With
Right.
Murray-Boyles, the fact that it's like he can put it on the deck makes him like a real short roll player. Like
Yes.
sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, this guy, like he's a good passer. He can turn that into short roll passing. And it's like, can he? Like that's a very different thing. And with Murray-Boyles, it's like, no, like I've seen him face up and like drive to the basket and make defenders make difficult choices and like have to rotate and then find the guy that gets open as a result of it. Like that is a real component of his game that he has. And yeah, like he's young for the class too. This is a guy who had mono at the start of the year. So
Yep.
like the slow start is extremely explainable because if you've had it or you know people that have had it, it's
Yeah. Sucks.
brutal to come over to
Sucks,
overcome.
dude.
So yeah,
Tough.
it's not good. So I think he's really exciting. I can see myself talking. I feel like I'm talking myself into him more and more as time goes on. Um, I'm still just like a tad hung up on the shot.
Yeah, sure, sure, and like it's gonna take some time. I mean, we'll see what he does the rest of the season, even too. But
Mhm.
I really like the footwork, man. Like I'm
Great.
just a sucker for good footwork in
Mhm.
the post, man. Like I remember loving Embiid when he was young, and I mean obviously now too. But I don't know, man. I think Colin Murray-Boyles might surprise some people, including
Yeah,
us.
totally. And I think like that type of footwork with that level of size and athleticism, it's indicative of something. Like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? It's just like that
yeah,
you have the functionality and intellect to like figure out how to do that stuff. And then you've got that sort of frame. It just gives you so many different ways to use it than a lot of other people. It's a good combination.
yeah.
So we're gonna throw it to our last break, and then on the other side, we're gonna talk some sleepers. So stick with us. So the first guy that we're going to kick off with is a player that you brought up for sleepers this week, and I was glad you did because I've been like, to be honest, for whatever reason, like I've just had a hard time like going out of my way to get more of his games on my schedule. That was St. Thomas at Northern Colorado. He is having a stellar season. Had a big game against Weber State and Dylan Jones this week, where he had 17 points, 12 boards, 7 assists. Then after that, against Idaho State, had 28, 12, and 8 again. So real interesting player just popped on film for me sort of immediately. What are you liking about St. Thomas?
Whew, there's a lot to like about St. Thomas, man.
Mm-hmm.
I love that he's an athletic 6'7" guy that takes a lot of threes. He's only shooting 33% right now from three, but that's off 6 attempts a game, and that's not really his game. I think that can change and get better. I don't
Yep.
think that's like a terrible percentage to shoot from three if you're taking 6.3 attempts per game. Like if you're
as
not
a lead
guard,
option too. Yeah.
he's not the lead shooter from three. He's just a guy that takes a lot of threes for them, and he won't take those threes in the NBA. Obviously,
Nope.
his role will be scaled quite a bit down. I like that he's like explosive getting downhill, right? Like when he has the dribble, and if he's coming off a screen and he's attacking the basket, it's really hard to stop, man. He's very physical, he's strong, and he draws fouls, man. He gets to the line almost 5 times per game. He shoots over 87% from the line.
Yeah.
He defends really well. He's averaging 2.4, 2.5 stocks per game. 1.7 steals and a block roughly, 10 boards per game. I mean, he just does everything. He's really athletic, and yes, he's playing in a bit of a weaker conference, but look who played for Northern Colorado last year, and look what they're up to.
Yeah,
right now,
so. Exactly. And I think that league is like becoming underrated too. Like
Dylan Jones there, agree
like
with you. I mean, Dylan Jones too.
Yeah, Dylan Jones is there. Like the Eastern Washington, like they've got some like freaky forward prospects in Cedric Coward and Lawan Watts. Like there's good forward talent in that league, and to me that matters. Like when I am evaluating these guys coming from these smaller conferences, I think what the stars in that conference looks like matters quite a bit. And like a lot of times these smaller conference, it's like a lot of good 5-10 point guards in that league, and like in the West, like you've got some real forwards out there. So or in the Big Sky rather. Like I think that matters, that it's like kind of a forward wing league. Yeah, St. Thomas, he just popped to me on film physically so much. Like he's just so big out there. Like he looks like an NBA guy. And there are times where you'll throw on a smaller conference. Like, oh yeah, that guy like is bigger than the other guys. But like with Saint, it's like, oh my goodness, like that is an NBA body out there. Yeah, like you mentioned, that I'm pretty optimistic about the shot. Like he was a guy that had that kind of shooting reputation coming into college. Really good at the free throw line. I think the passing is like interesting to me. Like it's one of those things where he's clearly overburdened as a playmaker, but he does some creative stuff from time to time that it's like, I think I trust it enough. I do think he probably has to shoot just to make the rest of his game a little bit easier. That's probably the big swing skill for him, is just like, how well is he going to shoot? The defense is awesome. Like you mentioned, like just so long, so strong, impossible to get through him, like has the feet to really stick on guys still, super competitive on the glass. Like I really like what he has going on. And I know that he had like 2 like iffy years at Loyola before he was there. I don't want to say too much on that front, but like being someone who's local to Chicago, I think that's a coaching staff where like for some guys it's great, for some guys it's just not a good place to play college basketball. And he's been open about it without being demeaning to the staff.
Sure,
that he's done, but like, yeah, I think he just found a much better situation, and I wouldn't hold what happened at Loyola against him at all. And I think physical tools are there. Skill is really intriguing. The defense is there, if nothing else. Really interesting player to me. Is he in your top 60 currently?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have him about 44, 45. I'm pretty high on him. Yeah,
I think that's reasonable.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, just from like the physical tools alone, it's like this guy's at least worth a shot.
Yeah, and I think like there's something to the like everything but the shot guys too, because like with the G League being this is what actually I was going to bring up on Murray-Boyles, like with the G League being kind of transient, like there's certain skills that I'm like iffier on like guys developing in the G League, where it's just like oh, he's got to figure out his playmaking, and it's like he's going to be playing with a bunch of guys that just want to shoot all the time, and he's going to have different teammates every week. Where like if it's a guy where it's like oh I just need to have like we need to, as a development staff, like put something together for him to make sure he shoots the ball better. I'm way more comfortable with that than a lot of other things. So yeah, that is St. Thomas, really interesting player. If you haven't gotten eyes on him, make sure you do. Let's jump over to Jamal Shed. He's a guy that sort of started to build momentum for himself. Really great defender. Like that has always been a big part of his game for all the Shed heads out there. The defense is great. Stellar on-ball defender, covers ground more like a forward than a guard, but can really lock people up. I think he was forcing, I wrote about it in my column last week, like over like the turnover percentage for opposing guards and pick and rolls against him is like 30%, which is close to where Sasser had it last year. So like he's just a menace. Like it is really hard to deal with him when he's the defender in a ball screen. Offensively, like really good table setter, gets a little bit erratic at times, but generally a very good passer and playmaker. The shot's a question, and like he's going to have to shoot to some extent. Lower volume, 32.7% on a downward trend, was up higher on like 36 not all that long ago.
Yeah.
You're a guy who's in Texas. You've probably seen more Shed than I have.
Yeah.
How do you feel about him and his NBA chances? Because obviously, like, the small guards are on the way out, but we've seen a guy like Craig Porter, who is like a really good defensive guard, who just kind of set the stat sheet, land himself a real NBA contract. Do you think Shed is close, or do you think the shot might just not be there?
So I watched a lot of him when he was at Baylor, because Texas played Baylor twice a year, and so I'd go to both games when I was covering the team. And it's so funny because he's always been a scorer, but just like you said, he's not like an elite shooter. Like you would expect he might be, but he's not. He's also a guy that I think is maybe a top 5 player in college basketball. That's how good I think he is.
Yeah, Shed's awesome.
I think he's on that level. I think he's as good as completely different kind of player, but I think he's just as impactful as a Connect is. I think he's just as impactful as a Klingon or whoever. So what I like, I think about the game, about his game, is that who are we talking about? Like just
Shed.
Shed.
Oh, sorry.
Shed. Yeah, so Shed. What I like about him, very aggressive. What I don't like, the age. He's
old and small guard.
He's an old dude. He's an old small guard that can't really shoot. That's not a great pitch.
No.
He's a great player. He's a great college player. And I'm not saying he won't do anything in the NBA. He totally could. He could totally prove me wrong, but he's a small, old guard that can't really shoot.
Yeah, it's tricky. Makes it really, really tricky.
Like, if you boil it down to it, that's kind of what it is,
Yeah, and that's tough. So let's hop over. We're gonna stay in the state of Texas with Dylan Dessou up next. So he was a guy that you brought up. He has had a fantastic season for Texas, and it feels like it's sort of gone under the radar, because I think Texas is one of those teams that, like, before the year, if you're looking at Texas from a draft perspective, right, who's the best prospect on this team? It's like, I don't really know. Like, maybe, I guess it's Dylan Mitchell. Maybe it's this guy. Like, I think Dessou might have a real argument for that. Like, scoring 16 a game, was a guy who shot early on in college. Like, his second year at Vanderbilt, he took 3.8 threes a game, made 37% of them, and then, like, became a non-shooter at Texas the last 2 years, and now is back to that 3.6 a game, making 51.4% of them. Always been good at the line. Weird release mechanically, where it looks like his guide hand comes off the ball entirely. But outside of that, like, some creativity as a passer, not a great playmaker, but 6'9", good body, awesome defender, guy who competes on the boards, really good touch on the interior. I've always been a little confused by him, just because I'm like, what is this shot? Is this reliable at all? But I like the rest of his game. I like his size. Where are you at with Dessou?
So I'm going to give you a small bit of background to help explain why I'm so high on him. So coming out of high school I think he's from Pflugerville, which is north of Austin.
Okay.
So he wanted to play for Texas his whole life, and Shaka didn't offer him, so went to Vanderbilt. Leads the SEC in rebounding as a sophomore. Leads the SEC in rebounding before his injury, averaging 9.3 boards per game for this guy. But the thing with him is they called him Bambi when he came out of high school, because his limbs he didn't have full control of his limbs yet. He was kind of clumsy, kind of a klutzy dude. And then it became part of his game. The unorthodox way he moves is a big reason why he's so hard to guard. It's such an unpredictable movement pattern. The way he moves is so bizarre that dudes just kind of don't really know how to guard him. The shot's weird. The way he dribbles is weird. The way he fights through, like, he can Euro too. I've seen him Euro before, and that's kind of goofy looking, but it's effective, man. It just works. And I can say this too. I've interviewed Dylan 3 or 4 times, and great. First of all, great person, absolutely just a great dude, and I have nothing but respect and wish nothing but for the best for him. But man, I really think he has an NBA career. I really do, and it's not just because he's a Texas guy. It's because I've been watching him for 3 years, and I've seen a lot of things that I think translate. And he'll never be a star. He's never going to be a guy that averages 18 in the NBA, but he can absolutely be a guy that comes off the bench and is like a spark plug kind of.
Yeah. And this is something I go back to a lot. I think the guys that sort of hang around, even if they never like super impactful, are worth kicking the tires on early. And I think those guys generally are guys that are like big and can defend and know how to play and have a requisite level of athleticism. And like, that is something Dessou has. So like it feels impossible to be like, you can't just be out on him. Is I guess what I'm saying. Like I think if you're just like absolutely not, you're slamming the door on a lot of things that we've seen at least keep guys like around the NBA. So yeah, I think he's worth investing in for that alone.
The last thing I would say about Dessou too is I'm not a big player comps guy.
Sure.
And they're very hard for me, and I get them
Mhm.
wrong a lot. But I will say he has a little bit of Keegan Murray to him, I think.
Okay,
He's got a little bit of Keegan Murray to him as a stretch for he's a little bit smaller than Keegan, but as a stretch for the thing with Dessou too is he can attack closeouts. He did it all. He does it all.
Yep.
He's been doing it all year.
Mhm.
And whether he's able to do that at the next level is kind of a question because he doesn't have like a quick release or a quick dribble or anything. But he is very good at he I think he picked up some of the Serge Ibaka Rice fake.
Yeah.
A great fake. I think Dessou picked that up a little bit because he's been pump faking dudes all year and dudes are going flying, So I think Dessou, I have him 41 or 40 right now on my board. I just switched him with somebody else. But yeah, so I think he's a top 40 guy, and I'm really excited to see what he does in his career. He's just a great dude and a great teammate, and everybody loves him. So I think he has a very successful career ahead of him. I really do.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see like what pre-draft looks like for him, both just on like the like Portsmouth elite camp like kind of circuit, but then also like just what intel is out of workouts on the shot, because the shot looks so funky that like that's where I'm just hung up. Like
So
it
weird.
looks so wild, and like the volume was like Keegan Murray's volume in college, and like then it's a different discussion where it's like, hey, this looks nuts, but you got to buy it. Where with it being what it is and the volume just being like moderate, I don't know. And like if it's not there, how much value does the attacking closeouts have? Like how much value does a lot of this interior stuff have? Like
definitely,
obviously much different player than Timmy Allen, but like Timmy Allen has struggled to carve out something greater at this stage in his career just because like he doesn't shoot.
And it's interesting you brought Timmy Allen up because they use Dylan Dessou similarly to the way they use Timmy Allen. They'll put him at the elbow and just kind of have him. He runs the offense sometimes. They run it through Dylan Dessou. So I think that's a sign. Having a coach trust you that much to run your offense through you as an interior guy. I mean, I guess he plays a lot on the perimeter, but you know what I mean.
As a forward, like you're not a point guard. Yeah,
forward. Yeah, and he's given a lot of responsibility in the Texas offense. So I think he's a guy that has the skill set to make a career in the NBA, and I think he's a guy that will hang around.
For sure. I think that's more than reasonable. Last guy we're going to close out on is BJ Freeman at Milwaukee. He was a guy covered for my Minnesota Intern series this offseason. Probably a guy who's going to need another year. He's a junior. Averaging 20.3 points, 6.7 rebounds, 4.3 steals, 4.3 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.5 blocks. 41.8 from the field, 37.2% from three on 7.1 a game, and 83% from the free throw line. Freeman is a guy who I'm really intrigued. Like I've just had this theory for a couple years, and I'm intrigued to see if it like kind of pans out or not. But basically what I've been thinking for a while is like the combo scoring guard off the bench could eventually be replaced more by like a wing size guy that plays like a combo guard, like just to get additional length and size on the floor. And that's kind of what BJ Freeman is. Like he's a 6'6", 210-pound combo guard. He gets a little bit erratic with his playmaking. He turns it over like over 3 times per game, which is bad, but the turnover percentage isn't terrible, like relative to his usage. He does get over ambitious at times, but he's strong. Like he gets downhill pretty well. Really good range on the 3. Great at the free throw line. Loves contact. Gets the line a lot. But I've been most impressed with from him was like I thought the defense was just really low effort last season. Like last season, his like combined stock rate was like 2.5. This year it's at 3.7. So like he was always good at like getting into position and he would take charges, but he just felt so passive. Like it just felt like a lot of like, I'm not going to jump to get this block. I'm not going to go into this passing lane. It just felt really kind of lazy.
Motor concerns.
Yeah. And like part of it too was like, I get that your role is really big, but it makes me feel like all you care about is shooting the ball. Where like this year it's like, all right, like you're putting in the work a little bit more on defense. He's just a 6'6" guy that does a lot of stuff. I think he needs the next year, like just continue to refine, build on the playmaking, get that shot more consistent, like whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, did you come away with like any intrigue in him, or like is he a guy that like next year you think could get into that top?
I think it's a
mix?
next year deal.
Yeah.
What league do they play in? Milwaukee?
They're in the Horizon, which is
okay. That's right. Which is one of the lower. I think it's one of the less competitive leagues. But
for sure.
I remember because the last dude who came out of Milwaukee was what's that kid's name?
Patrick Baldwin.
Baldwin. Yeah. So I'm not super familiar with this dude, to be perfectly honest. I don't watch a ton of Horizon ball.
Why not?
I spend most of my time on the Big 12, to be honest. But I watched like half a game of this guy's, and I like you said, he's overambitious sometimes. The thing that I like though is that he's overambitious versus being passive. I'd rather have a guy, if you're gonna play that position, I'd rather have you early on making some mistakes versus just being passive and not being aggressive. Like you said with Cody Williams, like that's a problem when a guy's like disappears. And so I think I'd rather have a guy who turns it over sometimes than a guy that disappears in big games. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think with BJ, it's just going to be a matter. Like he does, and I think it's really important for guys in like the tiny conferences to just stuff the stat sheet. Like you need to show like, I am different. Like I am not just a guy who does one thing in this tiny league. Like the fact that he is rebounding, high assist rate, like getting those defensive numbers up in addition to scoring 20 a game, I think matters quite a bit. Yeah, when I talk to him, like determined kid, like a guy who is really self-aware, I would say, about just like, this is what I struggle with. Like, these are my problems. Like, here's how I'm working on them. Like, he gets it to a degree. I think it's just gonna be a matter of like, is he gonna execute on it enough to where NBA teams say like, all right, like let's consider drafting this guy in 2025. So
yeah, it's very hit or miss drafting from those smaller leagues, because like it's not the same as drafting from even the West Coast Conference. Like that's drafting a guy out of the Horizon League or the MEAC or something. It's a risk. You don't, because you don't really know what they're going to look like against top competition. But then again, you have a guy like Dalton Connect who goes to Tennessee and dominates. He's going to be a great NBA player, I think, or at least a pretty good one.
Yeah,
so, you know, it's hard to judge, I guess.
Yeah, and with Dalton, it was different too, because Dalton like was so athletic that there were tapes of him like, all right, he blew by Grant Nelson, he's blown by Dylan Jones, like whatever. Where with BJ, it's like, all right, we got to see you against Providence in Colorado. Colorado game, he was like in foul trouble. He was 9 for 12. But in the Providence game, he put up 33 points and had 10 boards and like whatever. So it's like, all right, I've seen you do it, but I've also seen you like very much not do it.
Like, for sure. It's consistency, man. Like you were saying with Coleman Hawkins, it's like he should probably play another year at Milwaukee.
Consider transfer up.
Or transfer. I know that's like crappy to say, but like he might need to. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to put that on the table, but you
know. No. I'm in a similar boat, because like if he is in the Horizon League next year, and it's dicey too, because it's like the whole, like if you stay in the Horizon League, you have to be this dominant and more again. And if you transfer, like you just don't know what a coaching staff is going to do. Like it's just really easy for a new coaching staff to be like, never mind. Like we're invested in our guys, and that's it. So that'll do it for today's episode. I appreciate you coming on and taking the time to talk through some of these guys with me. Just one last plug. Where can people find you on social media and read all your work?
Yeah, man. So I'm at Keenan Womack, KEENAN WOMACK. My title is Young Boy Never Hedge Again. You can find me on Sports Illustrated. I write 3 pieces a week for SI's Draft Digest. And then I have my own site called Draft Punk Official, which is a Substack. Would love for you to come on. It's totally free. Anybody that wants to read it, I don't charge for any articles. All free, all for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you're following me at Boundboards. Make sure you're following No Ceilings at No Ceilings NBA. Subscribe to our Substack, NoCeilingsNBA.com. Make sure you're plugged into the YouTube channel. All that. Until next time, we'll see you next week.